Hi, everybody. I am Holly Celiano, and I have my guests, Jonathan and Rebecca Rodriguez, back, and they are with whiterabbit.com. They are here to talk about equity law and how it is our intention is what sets us free. So, where you put energy goes, where energy goes. No, I'm saying that wrong. Where
Where
intention
attention
goes,
goes.
energy flows.
Yeah,
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
easy.
yeah. Retake.
And it's whiterabbit.academy, but I'm sure they know because it'll be on underneath the link of the video.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's talk about intention.
Yeah, let's talk about intention.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty interesting because when we come up with these topics, when we're about to do these videos with you, something happens within that period of time because we do these every 2 weeks that really reinforces what it is that we want to talk about. And so there's this whole aspect of how our intention, of course, if we accumulate all that energy and put down into focus on the target, what we want, it'll bear to fruition. But then there's all this other aspect of all the hidden, the unknown, the aspects of about ourselves that we haven't worked through, that cause a cognitive dissonance, let's just say, with what it is that we're truly trying to desire or we're in pursuit of. And just to kind of start out this conversation a little bit about in these last couple of weeks, so I'll speak from my experience and Jonathan can speak of his. But let's just talk about when it comes to providing this kind of information to people to really help them, right? Jonathan and I have been doing this for about 3 years, offering a course of some form of method for people. And it's been amazing to see the amounts of blocks and stops that are put right in front of us that cause us to have to use more work, more energy to get through to actually attain what it is that we're trying to do, right? And it really goes to show like the intention was we really want to help people with this information because it really can offer support and remedy, right? And then there's all these other aspects of part of our personalities that we've developed over the years through our own experience, through the traumas, things like that. Where we're seeing is that even though that we're clear about what we want, as we desire it and put it out forth, all this other darkness comes up and we have to deal with it. So we can't attain fully 100% that. Yeah, we could help a few people here and there, but it's not like as ginormous as it really, deserves that respect for.
Yeah, it's like the universe saying, wait a second.
Yeah, exactly. Wait a second. So, for instance, I have this thing in my life where it was always really easy for me to give. I remember my stepdad taking me aside when I was like 7 years old and saying, Rebecca, you just need to really focus on yourself. Stop trying to do all these things for your friends that they don't want it or they're not receiving you, basically. And it's really easy to give, but really difficult, to receive. And I know a lot of empaths kind of feel that same way, right? They're so used to giving and giving and giving, and then when it comes to their term, it's like, oh, wait, hold on. No, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. And so what I recognize is that throughout these last couple of weeks, what's happened is that we've had to grow a greater level of understanding about our own internal space because of our intention of really trying to do a good job of providing this in material and making it easy for people to attain and then take them to that next level of complication and then helping people become accountable and responsible. And so an example of this is by me not having, even though I have this intention, by me not having the full on awareness of these layers, it attracts the people into my life that are going to show me, right, what's on the internal that I have to work through before I can actually fully align with this intention. And so in this last couple of weeks, we've been working through like, wow, this person is an archetype in our life, and it keeps showing up. It keeps showing up. Once we move on from one person that's like this archetype, another one shows up, and then bam, we're like, wait, what just happened, right? And so even our awareness, our intention is that we want to have clarity, when we want to have people around us who are of the same like-minded, who are not interested in taking advantage of other people, that kind of thing. Because we're working out all those traumas with our own body, we're still finding those archetypes. And but what's great, like we were just talking about before we started this thing, Holly, is that you said that if anything that comes into our life, we look to that silver lining of saying, yeah, this is what's teaching us, and then it's going to bring us on a higher level of that. So it was a very difficult last couple weeks, to run through all of those emotions of those feelings. It's like feeling like we're just being blocked, and we keep running into this type of archetype that makes us go back to like we were children or something like that. But it's all been part of this process of really having clarity to really take back this power that God wants us to have, his children to have, so that we can really move forward and spring forward with what it is that we're really intending. So it's like making sure that we're really aligned with that target, because just that little bit off, it can really, really screw things up. And this goes into the whole law aspect. But before I go into that, I want to open up because I know I'm talking a lot.
That's fine. Yeah, you did remarkably well. I would just add to that at one's most uncomfortable is the greatest opportunity for growth. And it's also, I'm going to get sounding like I'm spouting cliches, but they are that for a reason, and it's a case of physician heal thyself too. We're not immune to any of this, and we don't look at ourselves as experts, but rather people that are just maybe on the path a little further along, because really it is collective. And when it comes to manifestation, yes, we individually have the power, but when two or more are present, there's more Holy Spirit, obviously, and more potential for manifestation. So therefore, we're all in this together. And there's something that called people to your podcast. There's something that called you to us, right? To assemble this in order to dispense this information. So we have to work in divine intention with that. And you're going to be growing. We're going to be growing. We're all going to be growing together. So,
Well, as we were talking about before we started, it's all about, growing and expanding and not staying stuck, repeating the same cycles over and over and over. It's like, okay, I learned that lesson. It's time to move on. And then you get another lesson. But if you haven't learned that first lesson, people are going to show up, situations will show up to keep having you get that lesson. And once you get it, then
like
okay,
whack-a-mole.
you move on to another one. But I find as you move on up, the lessons get less harsh. If they're really harsh, it means you haven't gotten it, and the universe is going to come and smack you so hard, like, get this lesson, and then you finally get it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is like, okay, I learned that lesson, then what? The archetype comes up, for instance, again. How are we going to respond to that? It's like we can't respond with the same type of attitude we did before. We can't go through it just thinking, oh, this is willy-nilly, it's okay, I'm just going to be the same way that I was. It's like, oh, no, now I have to take a step back and see what was it that I responded before, and how is it that I'm going to act differently today when I'm presented with this type of continued lesson, so that way that I don't end up making the same choices that I did before, and it's always happening. I mean, every single day,
Always ever, yeah.
it makes it very uncomfortable, especially for people like Jonathan and I. Like I said, we like to really give, and when we run into narcissists, let's just say, who really want, and we think that we can reach them. We think that if we just change our language a little bit, if we just act like this way a little bit, if we give them just, this is what they, then that's going to make them settle down and be a little bit better. But that's not what it is. It's like, no, immediately from the beginning, it's letting you know, this is a persona type, and to how you should respond should be changed versus what it is that you've been before. Otherwise, you're going to be, you're going to be completely trampled on. And you're going to have to follow whatever it is that they want, their flows and their intentions, because of those little traumas that you can't get through in that moment. Just make a different decision. And this is all related to the law, right? We have people telling us there's no such thing as discharge. They debunked it, I should say. Okay. No, they debunked it because that didn't work. This didn't work. That didn't work. you know, equity, you can't have equity, right, in the world of commerce, which is completely false. Equity is always present, always present. The thing is that when people do these processes and they're trying to formulate a discharge, it's all about their perception. It's their perception of the law. That's what we're all looking at, even judges, even lawyers. It's always about what is it, how they're interpreting the law and how they're applying it to their situation right now, right? So everybody's out there, they learn these pieces of information and then they interpret it, right? And it's all based on wherever they're at in that moment, you know? And then that intention of finding that discharge is aligning them to that specific process. And that process may not be correct, right? But why isn't it not correct, right? Is it because of within the self, it has to learn something that they didn't catch before that causes their perception to be a little skewed, that then allows them to move forward on a process that's really not, you know, really going to fulfill what it is that they're looking for, you know? And so we were faced with this just recently about how there's no such thing as discharge. The bankruptcy is a lie. And I'm thinking, well, that's interesting because this person really, really believes that because it's been their experience where they're able to show that these processes didn't work. And so therefore it means that equity discharge doesn't work. And it's like, no, those are all interpretations based on where you're at in the moment. So you may have an intention to find the truth, but maybe you have a greater part of yourself that's really attached to not having the truth, that's really attached to having a cage, you know, that really likes this identity, you know? And so this is why intention is such a big deal, because you could go through with wanting, for instance, we have people go through the process. We just work out, we clear out their contracts, let's just say. And then they decide to take it on their own. And they say that they've been studying and they know a lot. Okay, great. And then they start adding all these little pieces from their things that they picked up from their past of like how to do something. And they'll start attaching it to this process. And so they start muddling up all the waters. But what they don't realize is that now they're starting to fall off their intention because they're not doing their inner work. They're continuing to have that same cycle of who it is that they were in the past while trying to attain something that's completely different than they've ever experienced. And so in that moment, when that happens, they start to see what takes place is the charge. The charge takes place and it creates new contracts. And then we have to go back and clear those, right? So we really see how this whole law aspect, this whole law, interpreting the law is really about where we are at internally, how clear we are internally to, and knowing ourselves about what traumas we've experienced, the identities that we're attached to, that we like being, and how when we're on this pursuit of freedom, it's a completely different reality than what we've ever experienced. So that's why when people go through the equity redemption process, they change. And it's only when they surrender to that process of recognizing this is coming up for me, this block, it causes me, I want to do this extra thing on top of this because I don't believe that this is going to work. It just seems too easy, you know? This process that we do, really easy. It's the easiest type of discharge that you've ever heard of, you know? No 1099As, no 1099Cs, no bonds, none of that, you know? It's just simple acceptance, simple rescission. But people have it in their identity that it's really difficult. This is a really difficult thing. So they'll make it difficult. And so even though it's their intention to discharge, it still doesn't come through because they're not seeing what's coming up and stopping themselves before they go ahead and make a decision on terms of how they're going to react, because they're still trying to live out that past identity through, yeah.
There's a lot of conditioning to overcome, right? So the first conditioning is probably due to growing up with television and newspaper and all the other media where the law is not yours. It belongs to these professionals over here and you are a fool. In fact, there's a lawyer maxim, or I should say attorney maxim. A client who represents himself is a fool, essentially, right? So they're constantly pushing, and I'm paraphrasing that, they're constantly pushing the idea, you cannot do this by yourself. You have to have a lawyer. But the original intent of an attorney was to help those out who are incapacitated, who are non-compos mentis.
Not even help them, but take advantage of what they have to be a pirate. They're pirates.
Well, yeah. And so any smattering or overlay of being able to help, it's to keep people contained. So there's a private and a public side, right? Or you can even view it as a corral or a pen, and the animals must stay in the pen. They cannot get out. And so there's a very intelligent animal that found a way out, and at least they go chase after him and try to bring him back, right? But the adversary exists for a reason, just like we're talking about this growth and intent. And so your approach when you enter into a courtroom or you're doing paperwork is that you're infused with this charge that's already, it's like you're fighting yourself, right? And so that has to be overcome 360 degrees. You know, you have to understand there's a reason for this, and it's there to be overcome. Whether you have a hero mentality or a victim mentality, it doesn't matter. You have to embody in that moment that, you know, you're with the divine. You know who and what you are. If you take it back to basics, you're a child of God. So what does he want you to do in this moment? And so, yeah, there's all kinds of external things like paperwork and attorneys and lawyers and judges, and they even build this facade of dominance in front of you. But there are more on your side than there are with them. And they are just there as a vehicle for your growth. If you can really embody that, you'll get through it all.
Well, here's also too thing bringing about the lawyers is that we see what their intention is, right? And so that's why people fall off this process. They don't continue is because they're overwhelmed with the amount of lawyer talk or judge talk, which is going to tell them this is what's going to happen to you if you don't do this. You know, you're going to you're going to be held in contempt. You're going to be arrested. You know, all your stuff is going to be taken from you. And you see, it's like, okay, well, if my intention is to do discharge, I have a clear intention of that, but it doesn't override or supersede the reality that they've boxed us in, which is they have the full control, right, to do whatever they want with regardless of what we say, right? Then we're going to be thrown off and then set right back in line with their intention, right? So our intention has to be greater than that. And the only way to do that is to continue to come back to the body, continue to come back to the breath, continue to use those spiritual tools so that we grow greater and beyond those conditionings like Jonathan was talking about, in order to make sure that our intention is greater than, right? Than whatever that whole paradigm is that says that you have to do it this way and that way because this is what's going to happen to you, right?
It sounds almost like anybody that has found you to use equity law, they have tried all these other, supposed proven methods which have not worked, but you're basically giving them the keys to get out of the matrix. Like your equity law is like, here's a path to exit the matrix, but then somehow they get clogged up attaching other things and other contracts that sucks them back into the matrix. So, like you said, your intention is, do you want to be free from all of this legal nonsense and all these things that bind you and hold you in the matrix? Or do you really want to be set free? And if they do, then using your class that you're offering will give them the keys of the kingdom to be set free to navigate any contractual law that keeps them bound in the matrix.
Yeah. One of the things that we go through, which is something so simple, in the White Rabbit course, is the difference between fact and truth. And the reason why we do that is because truth is something that is not subjective, right? It's an objective thing. Like this computer is a black, black computer. I cannot. Nobody can subject to that unless, of course, they were blind. Whereas, in fact, things happen only based on events. So the legal system is not based on truth. It's based off events, of the facts. And so the reason why we teach that in White Rabbit is because we want to show that you're going to receive, when you're doing a process like, say, getting out of your car, payment, and you're honoring your obligations via the lawful way, you're going to receive papers that look like facts, evidence of facts, but it's not, because none of the events have happened. So the reason why we put that in there is we're showing, look, facts can only happen off of events. Legal can only happen off of facts, okay? That's why affidavits, right? That's to start of the whole entire law process. Affidavits, your claim. But once they start telling you about the future, this is what's going to happen, that's how you know that's a lie. And all they're trying to do is get you off of your boat of your intention, right? To come and lay down with them and see this reality, right? They want you to believe in that
Come back to
reality,
that
even though it hasn't happened yet. And this is how most people operate. Think about an argument. More than likely, when you got in an argument with that person, you already had the argument in your head, right?
Mhm.
Prior to showing up to that situation. You know, there's that talk that happens, like you build yourself up, like I'm really angry about this, and this is what happened, this is what happens when I see that person, this is, but nothing happened until that point, right? You could even think of all their, I know people do this because I used to do it all the time. You just have that conversation with somebody as if they're really there. And then, or even when you have a dream, like I used to have dreams about my ex-boyfriends cheating on me, and I'd wake up so pissed off with them. Right? And that's the way we've been trained, is like we don't really live in the moment. We live completely in the head, and we think that all these made up realities are the truth and that they're actually facts, and but it's not. It's just made up in our head.
Yeah, that's part of the indoctrination.
Exactly.
That fact, truth, evidence, and proof are all synonymous. In other words, they're all the same word. You just exchange one for another to sound different. No, they have precise meanings. Proof and evidence does not equate fact or truth. They're all separate things. And so I think that's part of the conditioning, the indoctrination, right? And we get it from the media. Why are there so many cop, doctor, and lawyer shows? It's like everyone's perpetually a child. Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a doctor or a police officer, So that you can see obviously is the conditioning that has been poured out to the masses to keep them in that frame of mind to not think outside of the box.
And this is why we re-encourage our students. You have to do that inner work, because when you're looking at that piece of paper and it's telling you about all the things that are going to happen, which are all lies, you have to be able to see greater beyond it, right? You have to be able to calm the body enough to not be emotionally charged. Like we were talking about recently in the last couple of weeks, dealing with the kind of archetype that we're so accustomed to having in our life and seeing that show up again. Now what I'm learning is not to be emotionally charged by it. Like, yeah, of course they're going to act like that. Of course they're going to say those things. And it shouldn't destroy my whole day just because, but then it shows me where exactly in my body that I'm holding on to these experiences, that where they're meeting me at, and that's exactly the opportunity that we're having when we're dealing with inequity. So if you can let go and be a part of the experience, you're going to transform into being somebody who's truly greater than any experience that's happening in the physical reality.
And the idea is to transform this whole experience. It's interesting. Intention comes from the Latin word animus, and it's used in psychology and philosophy and so on. And it means, it can mean spirit, it can mean soul, mind, but it's also translated as intention. And think about it, in tension or under pressure, you're stretching out all the faculties of your being in order to manifest something on the other end. And it's directly embedded into the law. How many times have you heard on even various shows in the legal realm that, well, his intent was this, or this was his intention, right? It's an equity specifically is all about the intention. So you can think of equity as justice absolute or divine justice. In other words, nothing's lost, nothing's forgotten, everything's accounted for. And so what should take place or ought to take place is what takes place. And so if you trust in that and so on, and really you can even put forth effort in prayer and meditation, this is the outcome I want.
Absolutely.
And as long as that frequency aligns with the divine frequency, you combine wills, there's nothing that can stop you. There's nothing your lesson will be, I won't say it's going to be easy, because under tension or pressure requires effort, right? It's just like an archery bow being stretched out. It's with purpose. And then, of course, when you release it, all that energy flows out and goes to...
And that's why it has to be clear energy,
Yeah.
right? Because then you're going to start creating all these other things.
I read something the other day, and it's so true. We are all one. What separates us is our belief system and our thoughts. So whatever you're bought into a belief system and whatever your thoughts are, that's what separates you.
Yeah, it's great that you bring that up. Belief, a lot of times in our circles, I'm sure you've heard this before, where they separate the word out and it has
Mhm.
lie in the middle,
Yeah,
right? It's a German word, and I can't pronounce the German word, but it's like Liebe, right? It's love. So a belief is an idea that you're so in love with that you will defend it, even to the point of death. Think about wars, and especially religious wars. They're willing to put down their life to sacrifice to just an idea,
right,
right? And so it's really best to hold ideas almost like feathers, whereas beliefs are a little bit more like anvils. They keep you in a vicinity, like that cord that attaches to the baby elephant. And then later on, at a different point in time, it's just a string that attaches, and eventually there is nothing there. And the elephant still stays where it's supposed to, according to the masters, when it can rampage and run off, you know? So,
right.
With this whole aspect of intention, I want to bring this up because if people choose to sign up, and do a path of equity redemption, I really like to have this story for them to know because, we have people that have been studying with us for maybe going on 2 years that haven't received any redemption. And they think that they're doing everything right, right? But actually, when it turns out, when you go a little bit deeper, you see what the cognitive hiccups are that causes them to make specific choices in that moment, right? So, for instance, I worked with this, I'm not going to give very much information away, but I worked with these people that had a huge case that was going on. And one of the things that I kept saying is like, you really need to work on the internal world because there's a lot of fear here and because there's a lot at stake, right? A lot of fear, especially when it has to do with your family. It's a big thing, when you're being challenged with a system, somebody that's not even a part of your family and coming to take your children away that belongs to you. I mean, that's a huge endeavor. It's not easy. And it's not that the fact that, yeah, the paper can be done all day. Those are just physical aspects. But it's the internal world to really move away from that paradigm that something can happen to you and your kids like that, right? So that you don't fall into those little traps. And the reason why, and these people after 2 years, they could say, oh, equity redemption doesn't work, right? But they think that they've been giving their entire they gave it all their belief. They gave it everything that they had. They really aligned with the intention. But if you actually go back and like listen to the court hearings or go back and just to see one thing that happened after another, you'll see that actually what took place is that while the paperwork was happening, the one that really mattered the most wasn't doing the studying, was just listening to me, in my direction. And then another thing is like while in court, putting up little points of arguments that causes the judge to say, okay, like, because the judge is always going to act like they don't know what you're talking about because they're trying to test to see if you really know what you're talking about. And then once you give a little sliver that you don't, or maybe that you are still charged by this, maybe they can get you because you still feel like this, that they have jurisdiction over you. Let's just say it like that. They have the right? Then they'll start to go down that path with you, right? They're not going to just give it to you just because you say the words. They really have to see that you're truly aligned. So if you give a little bit of an expression of where you're arguing, just a little slight bit, then you can be seen as crazy. And I often know when this happens because the judge will put on a mental
requirement, yeah.
like a mental test requirement. They want to see now where you are mentally because you're saying this over here, but then at the same end of your mouth, you're also saying these little words,
And it makes more money. Psyche valves always lead to more money.
So here's the trip up. I know specifically it's because sometimes when people join this course, they project onto us, mostly me, because because I'm talking to them all the time, and it's like I've seen it happen a couple ways where they want to be my success. They think, oh, if I'm successful, then you get to have a trophy, where again it's like, or if I'm successful, then somehow then you're better than me. Do you know what I mean? And it all has to do with this reality of thinking like this complete projection. How can they be using me to not take responsibility for what it is that they're experiencing in their life, their own comfort with themselves, their own fears, you know? And this gets right in the middle of that whole intention. You know, it can get really frustrating. It's like, what can I do to get you to see this is not about me? You know, yes, I'm just here as a guide, but it's not about me. I'm just pointing back to you where it is that. And the reason why equity redemption didn't work is because it shows you where you were at, like where what you weren't willing to give up yet, you know, to allow that reality to come to fruition because it's there. This is the way. And we have lots of testimonials, which people have access to underneath this, you know, I'm hoping underneath this video, to be able to go see what people's stories are. And it's always amounting to the same. It's them having to let go of the ego, of the identity around everything that causes them to move in the world. Like I worked with a guy who was married for a long time, did everything for his wife. Then after she tried to go after everything of his, after she asked for a divorce, you know. And even though she got paid during that time, you know, while they're together and building that company, it was really all of his stuff. But the identity is that he had this desire to really love his wife, right? It's that female aspect, the archetype that played in his life, that he was willing to put down his own masculine divinity in order to think that this is the way that I love her. So when it came to me helping out with this process, it was like, this is going to be your success, Rebecca. You know, this is how can I please you to ensure that this process happens? And it's like, no. Here, you're having to deal with all those thoughts, all those feelings, all those emotions that took place for 20 years that caused you to deny your divine masculinity. And what God wants you to see is he wants you to start getting into that divinity because he sees you, right? He wants you to grow and he wants to become your fullest, best self. And the only way is to move away from those old paradigms of behavior where you continue to, you know, deny yourself of whatever because you think that this is better. This is how I'm going to get loved, or this is how I'm going to receive what I need to, you know? So it's a big mind game that we're working with. And yeah, often those that are projecting, it's a lot more difficult for them to get through it. Whereas those that can take full on responsibility, accountability for what they're feeling, for all of it, even to be able to come and see that letter, it's like, wow, I'm really angry with this lawyer for sending me this piece of paper. Like, this is just freaking bonkers, you know? And then doing all that work around it and then being able to respond. Because if you don't, I promise you, you will not respond, or you'll respond with an argument, right? Or you'll stop doing equity redemption altogether because in your mind, it thinks that it doesn't work because the mind is still working out all those emotions. It can't really see the truth behind all those letters, behind all those words. Whereas when somebody sends me something and say, have you ever seen a letter like this? Have you ever gotten this response? And I see exactly what's going on, you know, but because I'm not emotionally charged by it, you know, if in the past when I didn't have very much experience of it being successful only through my own self and I was helping people and they would send me letters, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is scary, you know? And then I would have to go through, okay, I need to be a stronger version for them to see that I'm not affected by this, you know, that I have to clear my own energetic field because it's a lot of make believe, being empowered with intention, and then this reality is like it's like a freaking zoo, you know. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Listening to you both talking, it's bringing everybody back. Stop abandoning yourself
Exactly.
because you abandon yourself thinking, if I do more for this person, they'll love me better. It ultimately, we have to love ourselves. And everything in life is to bring you back that you are the love. You need to love yourself. And when you love yourself, you pick yourself first over everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's sounds like a big part of what this is about is remember we are the love. We have to love ourselves first. Nobody's going to love you in the way that you love yourself. And it's self-care.
And how powerful that is too, to think that that's what the law is teaching us, is how
Hmm.
to love
Yeah.
ourselves.
Love is the fulfillment of the law, and it starts with you. You cannot love anyone else until you sufficiently love yourself. It's that
Correct.
same old adage of, everyone uses the cabin pressure in the airplane. It it goes out, the masks fall. Don't put it on somebody else. Put it on yourself first. That way you stay conscious and you can help them.
Correct.
So when you're talking about equity redemption and equity in personam, you are truly, as soon as you start asking for permission from that lawyer, from the judge, or whatever, as soon as you start asking for permission, meaning as soon as you start following their little lines of facts,
Reasoning.
reasoning, and things like that, then you stop loving yourself, right? Because you
Right.
know what's best. You know what's best for you. You have divine truth in you. We all have been given a gift. We know the difference between right and wrong.
Hmm.
And but that's the whole aspect of self-love that we're working through.
Yeah. And these symbols, it's all paper, right? It's either paper or verbal, right? So it's these words, the literacy, the language that's coming through that charges us up. And just recently, someone wanted to challenge all that. And we tell people there's nothing to prove to these people. They think completely differently, right? They don't think like you're thinking. So you can't quote the law to them and tell them that they're in violation of it, right? Because that's a charge and it comes
That's
back. And now
that's playing on
is,
their level.
yeah, and this is strictly with equity. There's other processes where you may want to do that, but strictly equity is that,
With the law.
yeah.
With legal, that is.
And so everything you then say, well, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, or here's the law and this is what you're in violation of, is just a buildup of an electrical charge that they can turn around and pin it to you.
And so that's why if your intention is to be greater in freedom, then you know that you're releasing your mind and your body and your spirit from all of their charge, so that your physical actions really align with your intention, and that the things that you say on paper truly align with your intention. Because you may be saying that you're asking for equity, and then you write all these things about equitable, that the equity is yours and yada yada yada, you're here to pay or whatever at all. But at the same token, you're writing words in there that are opposite meaning, because maybe you don't know what they really mean, or maybe that you set them at a charge. This actually brings back to a story. When I first did equity redemption, actually it was my second time, because the first time was with a former partner who did it, and then a year later I got in trouble. And what I had the paperwork, and I knew about acceptance. I wasn't like fully, not to the level that I know it now, but I did it with the paper. But at the same time, because I was so charged, I took another piece of paper and I wrote it out in black. And I said to the judge, your black magic does not work on me. And all of this, I return this back to you. And this is, but you have no power over me, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what I just did?
Gave them all the power.
It just gave him another contract, because I was scared. I was scared in that moment. I knew I had the idea of like how this works, but I was scared that I was really going to go to jail for 3 months. And so of course I'm going to fight and say, no, that's not the reality that I'm creating for myself. But no, really, truly, how does intention work? You don't need to tell anybody, right? You don't need to tell, this is what I'm creating for it to manifest. No, you just have to go into your silent space and truly align yourself with that frequency, right? It doesn't happen any other way. And so that's what I love about equity. It's teaching us how to do that.
So for the audience listening about your class is starting in January, correct?
Yeah, it's yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's
And then this will help them with if somebody has a foreclosure, if somebody has legal issues with credit cards or any type of legal issue, criminal issues, pretty much anything.
Well, yeah. So when you're talking about foreclosure,
Could you try again?
Try again, please.
Whoop, we are listening.
Yes, they are.
When we're talking about foreclosure, we're talking about a lot of back and forth of dishonor, right? So what makes foreclosures next to impossible to do is the amount of paperwork that's involved, the amount of honor. It's not even just what's going on in the courtroom, but it's also the mortgage that was dishonored, right? So I don't like messing with foreclosures. However, because of our amazing team, we have some other things that allows us to know exactly what to do in those moments to ensure that the foreclosure doesn't move forward. But I personally, yes, when it comes to the equity redemption process, it's all about prevention of wrong, right? So we don't want to get to down to that foreclosure process. We want to get to the point where the mortgage is still fresh, let's just say, or maybe you're only a year in paying, and then clear it out because we know that it's going to require the least amount of work. Whereas if there's a custom of you having done something a specific way, then there's expectation of how that's going to follow through. A foreclosure is happening because discharge must happen in a world of where we're operating debt as credit. So a foreclosure has to take place if those notes are outstanding and they're still being in default, right? And it talks about that in the UCC. That's why we have bankruptcy, right? It's only one form of discharge. It's the last form of
Last
discharge
resort.
if we don't know anything else, right? So, but yeah, criminal. I mean, we just recently had a guy who was, and you'll see it on the testimonial page, a guy who was had been arrested, driving on a suspended license. The case was going on for about a year and a half. He did all these other processes and things like that. Nothing was working. And then we did the process. We cleared out and this is an interesting story. So when you go and see that his name is Brian, Brian B, no, Brian C.
Brian C.
It's a really interesting story because you'll see a little bit of his thought process and how he actually did the whole 380, the 180. So he had a suspended license license, all that stuff, got arrested, and then we did the paperwork, and then 3 weeks later we got a complete disposal of his warrant and his case. And the other one that was attached to that also got closed.
Wow.
And what was interesting about this though is like the amount of what he had to do on the internal world to allow that to fruition was pretty interesting, and you'll hear that in the story. But to when I saw him, when we went to visit him in Arizona, because we had all these other things going on, and he was there, so he met up with us. I did sit down with him, and we did some clearing, because we had to work it out with the anger, right? He had a lot of anger, and that kept fueling his experience, right? Even though he was so tired and he was so worn out, like, just make the stop. What he was dealing with was all this anger. And so when we cleared that out, it wasn't surprising to me that it only took 3 weeks for his case to get cleared.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
So people can sign up for the class at whiterabbitacademy.com, correct?
Yeah.
It's dot academy.
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 Yeah.
And the way the course is working, so it's all the lessons, are in there and stuff. And what we're trying to do is a weekly aspect where people, after the first week, after the second week, after the third week, we can meet together as a group and talk about those lessons. In the past, we've done it a little bit differently. And based on our experiences there, to make it even more better, we created a little bit of that kind of interaction on a weekly based on the lessons for that week, instead of giving them everything all at once and then having questions. There's a lot of material to integrate, and a lot of also too, people are trying to, I know they're trying to say, okay, well, they learned all these other things. How do we put this in respect with what it is that we've learned, right? That's a difficult thing for me. Everything that I've learned, every time, I always went in it fresh, as if I didn't know anything else prior to that. And I would say for anybody that's trying to learn equity, this side, not probably what they're told about subrogation, all that stuff, right? Creating a bond, creating negotiable instruments, things like that. They have to leave that at the door. Use it in terms of places to understand where you're at in your reality in relation to law, right? How the law works, what the land looks like. But don't use it as a form of method to think that has anything to do with what we're doing here in equity redemption. So two separate things, leave it at the door. Of course, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but it's really good just to act as if you never knew anything before and then
Right.
going into the fresh. And what's cool is that people run into this without having ever learned anything, which they're really at an advantage. And I've seen those that have that, they're the ones that tend to fly because they're not having to fight with all these other aspects, even the aspect of all the things that, you having like I know what it's like. I'm sure you know what it's like, Holly, spending a lot of money on things that don't work. And because it didn't work, it's really hard to let go of the fact that you spent all that time and energy on it. So you got to make it work somehow. You have to fit it into what you're doing, and that's just all a part of an identity, of an egoic identity.
Otherwise, it goes to waste. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's
that's
just
not true.
right. So it's just part of that process of learning. It just, everything has a time and place. And so when people are trying to discharge, they're using different methods that are not for this time and place, you know?
There's much to unlearn before you learn. And it's just like I said,
Right.
if you could put it aside, I know it's tempting, but I have this thing over here. I know what you're talking about because I can add to it. And every time, so far in our experience, when someone adds something to equity,
It causes a big mess
it
that we have to
it
walk
just
out.
it delays the process.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we're coming into that hour, are we?
We are. So we will end it here and we will see you back come the new year and sign up for the class if you all want to learn equity law and take the law into your own hands and break free from the matrix and be your own loving, authentic self in navigating these laws that we live in a world of laws, how to navigate so that you're not entangled into the old system. You
And the
can
old self.
live a free way of living on this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And check out those testimonials because they're really
Yeah, they're
inspiring.
good.
I
Really
will post them below. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank
You've
you.
been
Take care.
such a wonderful